Hello everyone and welcome to this exchange webinar. The title of this exchange is How the Renewable Heat Incentive Can Work for You, and it will last approximately an hour. Thank you for registering, and thanks also to Patrick Alcorn from the Department of Energy and Climate Change for presenting today. My name is Emma and I am the Member Events and Communities Officer here at the EAUC. As you know, the EAUC delivered the Sustainability Exchange, which was initially a funded project from HESC and led by Staffordshire University. So what are exchanges? Exchanges are free lunchtime webinars on a range of sustainability topics. Anyone can present them. If you'd like to, just get in touch with us at sustainabilityexchange@eauc.org.uk or myself. So there's just a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. I have muted you all just to avoid any background noise, so that you can hear as clearly as possible. If you have any issues hearing at any point during this exchange, could you please use the chat box in the bottom right of your screen to send me a message saying so. Hopefully most of you have working microphones or you're connected through a telephone. Don't worry if not, as you'll still have the opportunity to ask any questions at the end by typing them to me in the chat box, and I will read them aloud to the group. This webinar is being recorded, so you can view it again or share it with friends or colleagues. It will be made available on the Sustainability Exchange with the presentation and any other resources a few hours after the exchange is finished. You will also be sent a short survey to gain your feedback. Please take the time to complete this as it helps us to improve our CPD and training events in the future. Okay, so that's all from me for now. Thanks again, and over to you, Patrick.
I hope everyone can hear me. What I'd hoped to do today was just to run through an overview of the RHI in general and then open it up for a discussion so that you get a chance in this small group to ask any questions you have and we will endeavour to answer them. So, does my pressing that change it for everyone? Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say is, as most of you know, working in energy, interested in energy, the government has some really ambitious targets to reduce emissions. 8% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, 34% of that needing to be achieved by 2020. But more importantly, our building stock needing to be virtually zero carbon by 2050. Now, when you start to think about that in heat terms, that's probably one, maybe two boiler changes away. So we really need to be influencing decisions made now in terms of design, in terms of retrofit, in terms of boiler choices, so that we can genuinely get a supply chain and a market in a place where we can achieve that. The reason the buildings need to be zero carbon is obviously that we need what carbon we do produce in 2050 for areas of the economy that we don't believe are decarbonisable in that time. Things like heavy industry, shipping, air travel. Some of those things that we see as much more difficult in the next 30 years to decarbonise 100%. The second thing that we need to do is sometimes complementary and sometimes not, is purely the Renewable Energy Directive from the EU. We have a statutory commitment to reduce or to increase our renewable energy across all sectors by 15%. We're at 4.2% at the moment, and the reality for that in heat is that we need to get about 72 terawatt hours of heat a year from renewable sources. Now, currently at about 17. So in 6 years' time, we need to have almost got a 500% increase in renewable heat across the domestic and the non-domestic sector. And so, you know, the oil prices expected to increase, gas prices are expected to increase. There is also a fiscal opportunity for businesses, for universities like yourselves, but also in terms of security of supply. If we can't afford these, lights go out, we no longer have control over them. Conversations about Ukraine and the impact on gas prices, all of those sort of things. So we're decreasing North Sea oil and gas. There is a debate about shale gas, obviously, but long term we expect fossil fuels to increase in price year on year. And as a result of that, to ensure that we have the energy supply at a cost-effective energy supply, we need to bring in renewable heat and electricity. We need to replace the aging infrastructure. That's all there. Huge task across the energy sector, and a lot of your universities will be now looking at courses in renewables, in low carbon, in innovative technology development, looking at hydrogen fuel cells, looking at how we can develop fossil fuel free cars, etc., etc. So it's a big area for innovation and development, but alongside that there are significant amount of near-term projects, 28 million already in the planning pipeline, and we need significantly more, probably over 100 billion in the next 5 years. So again, the opportunity size of the task is massive. Now across renewables, here we're talking about DECC, but there are other funding streams if you're looking at greening your fleets around electric vehicles, hybrid technology vehicles that the Department of Transport run. Here I'm going to focus on the renewable programs, and this is who can benefit from what. So in terms of electricity, larger scale renewable obligations for energy suppliers, feed-in tariffs for projects more of your sort of, I would imagine, some universities might be interested in the electricity side of things. But again, we're moving towards the new system by 2017 for contract for difference and moving away from the renewables obligation in the longer term. Most importantly, from our perspective, it's business, it's insulating first, the Green Deal's there, ECO's there to help buildings, domestic and non-domestic, to become as thermally efficient as they can cost effectively. And then the RHI is there to help provide support for the move to renewable heat in those smaller thermal demands. We also have a program of work that is not about renewables, but is about transition. So looking at instigating district heating networks, and that might well apply for campus-based university and colleges, where you have a mix of domestic and educational facilities. You may well have sports facilities on site, cultural facilities on site, and therefore you have a range of uses, and you might want to connect them all to a single heat system. And we have grants for district heating, even if you're using gas or oil for those as well. But today we're focusing on the renewable side of things. For those of you who don't know, very quickly, we're at a point where we're trying to reach 30% of our electricity supply renewably. So the feed-in tariff is there, as I say. It's there supporting mainly solar PV at the moment, but there is opportunities to do wind and hydro and AED through that. So don't limit yourself to solar PV just because that's the one that everyone else has done. Message from DECC across renewables is all about choosing the right technologies in the right places for the right circumstances. So there is some work to do. It's not just about swapping in and out of boilers, putting a wind turbine. This is an opportunity, but it needs to be thoroughly researched and planned. I'll keep this short. So as it says there, 99% solar PV. Key to incentivizing small scale, that's great, but again, we need we need to get communities and organisations working within the community more effectively, so that it's not just single installations going in, but these are more organised and coordinated in the local areas. The RO, again, looks at bigger scale things, so we're talking about some of the offshore wind, wave, tidal, deep geothermal electricity, where they're digging 4 kilometres into the ground. Energy from waste is also interesting if you've got a lot of waste on site, working with local communities, local authorities, to bring those things into a coordinated manufacturing heat. And then moving on, we're moving to the energy market reform. So this is the subject of a lot of the work the department's doing at the moment. We have an energy bill came into the Energy Act in at the end of last year, and we're moving towards a contract for low carbon energy, secure price at which companies can sell their electricity to consumers, and better confidence. So we're hoping to bring forward much more certainty and flexibility for the market. But again, this is something in some cases that we're looking at now, we're looking to do, then the feed-in tariff and the renewable heat incentive are policies that we need to be discussion and investigation. On the Green Deal side of things, there are changes booked, there is changing as well. There'll be announcements around, there have been recent announcements around the community, which has allowed local authorities to access funding. Not all local authorities, so again, if you have a good working relationship with your local authorities, talk to them about the opportunities. Provide an opportunity for energy efficiency, support for energy efficiency. The Green Deal communities, some local authorities have recently been given grants to lead on energy efficiency programs. So if you're in those areas, you can find those areas from the DECC website, and if you're in those areas, you can work with your local authorities on the projects they're doing. ECO is obviously the energy company obligation, and this is where energy companies are looking to provide funding to of energy efficiency measures to meet their obligation. That probably won't apply greatly to universities, but may be part of community projects or area-based projects that you might want to do. But we're really here to talk about heat. That's my specialist subject, as I say. And despite the fact that all of what we've talked about so far has been going on for a number of years in various guises, CERT, CESP, and other things, heat is the biggest single reason we use energy in our society. 70% of all heat is a fossil fuel. It creates a third of our carbon emissions, and we spend £32 billion a year heating buildings. So it is a big part of the problem, and we can't meet any of those targets that I talked about at the start without tackling this problem. So the whole of your building stock, be that academic, leisure facilities, be that training centres, be that accommodation, all of those things will need over the next 35 years to become low carbon and in fact probably renewably heated. And what we're trying to do at the moment through the RHI is to provide a mechanism for that to happen. There is strategic heating for those of you who have an interest in the wider strategy or courses on the wider strategy, and obviously I can see people's names, but I can't see the organisations that you represent or your job titles, so I'm trying try and spread this over all of that. But the document there from last March provides the strategic approach that we're going to look at over the next 4 to 5 years. So the RHI provides the funding, 2 streams, non-domestic and domestic, and we've had the renewable heat premium payment for the last 3 years to cover the gap, but I'm pleased to say that we launched the domestic RHI on the 9th of April this year, so there is no longer an RHPP. It is just a choice between, or just the use of, the domestic and the non-domestic schemes. And the key differences there are the non-domestic came first, November 2011. It is designed for commercial, industrial, public sector, so your buildings, generally speaking, would be in that area, but also district heating for multiple homes. So if there are multiple homes on a single system, heating system, that would come under the non-domestic. And the non-domestic is paid over 20 years, and the heat is metered. So what this means is that your payment is in relation to the actual amount you use. So you will get higher payments in the winter when it's cold and you use more heat, and lower payments in the summer. The reason the domestic came later was because we didn't think that that model was particularly attractive in a household setting, although it represents best value for government. So we have got a domestic scheme that was launched, as I say, this April, for those individual properties, whether they are private homeowners, social or private landlords, or self-builders. In that scheme, the payments will be made over 7 years. We still compensate for the full 20 years, but we just pay it back faster. And we pay back on a deemed amount rather than a metered amount. That means that payments are equal throughout the year, and so people can pay back, householders can pay back capital they've borrowed more with less fluctuations in their own payback. So we think that the scheme is more appealing to the individual householder. The non-domestic will provide 85, probably 95% of the heat that we require, and that is where the focus is. But the domestic is there to support that and to help build supply chains, help bring professionals into the industry where there is probably a gap in terms of skills, in terms of understanding of the technologies and the installation of these technologies currently. So the non-domestic is where universities, colleges would fit in amongst all those others on there. And as I say, the big one to look out for is district heating, which has a tariff of its own. We are in the process of increasing technology. So from later this spring, these are the tariffs that would be available to you should you choose one of these technologies. To date, obviously, biomass, small biomass has done particularly well, and you can see all the statistics on who's done what and how much of what has been done on the Ofgem website. They're our delivery partner, but that gives you the sort of idea of if you think about how much heat you're using in your buildings and multiply that by those tariffs, you can work out very quickly the sorts of returns that you might see from your heating. There are quite a range of technologies there. Biomass, as I say, is done best to date, but there's also ground source and water source heat pumps for those who are near water or have large spaces that they can utilize in this way. Air to water heat pumps and solar thermal. Unlikely that you'll be into biomethane, and CHP is an interesting one because that also attracts a feed-in tariff. So there's all sorts of ways that you can interact with other policies here, and they are designed to be complementary. So if you can do things that work in both the feed-in tariff and the RHI, or the Green Deal and the RHI, they are designed so that you can maximize your returns. As always with the government scheme, the rules are complex, so always check with Ofgem over eligibility. They provide a service, they have a call centre, they provide that check, so use that to make sure that what you're planning to do fits within the scope of the schemes. There's a huge amount of guidance on the website, so you can pre-read and pre-judge some of that. All equipment must be new at the time of purchase. Heat must be by water or steam, so no direct air heating systems are eligible. MCS if it's smaller than 45 kilowatts. Biomass boilers must meet air quality and designed as primary fuel source, and we're bringing in some sustainability criteria, which I'll talk about in a minute. You will need to have meters, and they are difficult, so you need to understand how to calibrate them, where to put them, and you will need to submit design of that to Ofgem so that they can make sure that it is appropriate. And if you have grants from local authorities or central government, those may need to be repaid to be eligible. That's so that we don't double pay you. It is just one of those issues, and you just need to declare that as part of the Ofgem process. So this slide is, I'm just going to leave that with you because it will be available to you. It's more for you to peruse, but it's a way through the application process. The application process has seen quite a lot of delays because people have not followed this to the letter. So what they are submitting is missing things or doesn't include the meter specifications, etc. And all Ofgem do is go through the list, see that it's not there, and send it back to you. And so the earlier you put a complete application in, the earlier you will be accredited. Some of the common issues there are around lack of fuel records, metering components not installed properly. The one that we find most interesting is where the boiler output is higher than the stated capacity on the form. So basically you're getting more out of the equipment than it can possibly do. And all of those sort of things. So it is complicated. Take your time. There are installers who will help you with that. Work with them. They've done more of these than you have. They will provide support, and Ofgem, as I say, are there to also provide support. Once you've done it, you will need to get paid, you will need to submit regular meter readings. You'll also need to say that it is still functioning and that you're still using it in terms of an annual declaration. Ofgem will make the payments to you quarterly, and they may select yours to come and audit to make sure that what you are telling them is true. Hopefully none of that is too onerous and is just in line with best value for government funding. The domestic, if you have individual properties, for instance, staff accommodation as part of it, the domestic may be for you. Fewer technology, so only biomass, air source, ground source, and solar thermal eligible for this. Only one space heating technology per property, but you can put solar thermal and a heat system on a property and you'll get paid the full tariff for both of those. And while most are deemed, if the homes are not used for 183 days of the year, i.e. 6 months, then they would need a meter. And if you keep a oil boiler or a gas boiler, you'll need to have a meter there as well. That's just so that we only pay you for the amount of renewable heat that you use. Again, some guidance. The thing to note here is in the second set, for the domestic scheme, you must have a Green Deal assessment carried out. Those Green Deal assessments will prove that you've done the basic loft and cavity wall insulation, but they will also give us a heat demand figure against which we deem. You don't have to do all the things on the Green Deal assessment that are green ticked. You only have to have loft and cavity wall, but that gives us the opportunity to calculate your tariff repayments. Quarterly payments are paid over 7 years. The thing to remember is that the tariff is only part of the equation, and so you also need to think about the bill savings, and these figures are against an oil boiler for those in off-gas areas, but as you can see, some of them are quite significant with biomass and ground source heat pumps up near 40% annual savings. So again, it is a higher capital cost. The RHI will reimburse for that capital cost. The aim of it is to give you that money back, but you will also have the ongoing savings from the fuel bills. Let me just go back a slide. Things like bed and breakfasts, halls of residence are thought of as domestic. They may not have a domestic EPC. In fact, halls of residence almost certainly won't, and therefore are eligible for the non-domestic scheme rather than the domestic, even though people live in them. So just when you're doing your calculations, remember the differences, both in terms of the 20 years and in terms of the need for metering. We're introducing biomass sustainability criteria. The suppliers list will go live shortly and will become mandatory later in the year. The idea of this is to make sure that people don't just chop down all the woods and feed it into their biomass. So there are requirements there. The thing to note is not to stockpile fuel and not to sign up to long-term contracts unless people are on that list from when it goes live, because even if you're in the scheme already, you will need to comply with this, and if you're getting your fuel stock from people outside of that list, you will become ineligible for your RHI payments. And the last slide, I hope, yes, is just a set of for more information. So ESAS, the Energy Savings Advice Service, are providing a line for domestic scheme. On the non-domestic scheme, everything is through Ofgem. There's an RHI inquiry line, there's guidance on their website, and there's an email address. So always ask first. If you have any doubts, talk to one of those organisations. They will provide you with the support you need to make the decisions, and then hopefully that gives us a half hour for questions.
Oh, that was great. Again, to everyone, apologies for the sound issue earlier. Yeah, we now have plenty of time, so if anyone does have any questions, and I really do insist that you take this opportunity now whilst we do have Patrick live to ask any questions, then please do. You can either type them in the chat box and I can read them aloud on behalf of you, or if you would like to, I can unmute you and you can ask them questions yourself. So I'll give you a few minutes for everyone to have a think, and hopefully we shall have some good discussion. question here from Phil. He's asking whether applications can be made retrospectively, i.e. a GSHP installation installed a couple of years ago.
So on the domestic side, anything after the 15th of July 2009 is eligible. On the non-domestic side, you'll need to talk to Ofgem about the explicit rates that you will get, because you'll be at the old rates, not the ones that I've shown. But phone the Ofgem. In fact, it's probably a better slide to leave you with. If you phone the Ofgem inquiry line on 0845 200 2122, they will be able to give you a precise answer on whether your system is eligible, if it meets the various criteria, if you've got the meters in the right places, etc., in order to judge whether that would be that particular example would be eligible.
That answers Phil's question. Are there any more questions from anybody? We have plenty of time. Oh, we've just had one come in here from Mohammed. He asked, how would you comment on the certainty of this scheme, as there have been a lot of uncertainty in the national policy landscape?
So you're right that there is uncertainty in the landscape, and to add to that uncertainty, there is a general election in about a year's time. So what I would say is that we have a guaranteed amount of money for the next 2 years. If you are in the scheme within that time frame, then it is a legally binding contract between the government and you for the full payment of the scheme. The Chancellor said in the budget in 2013 that he envisaged the RHI being open until March 2021, but obviously governments find it very, very hard to bind successor governments to any particular spending, and that will be a decision for whoever comes into power next May. So we do have budget agreed through to March 2016, and we have set out how we expect to spend that money in regulation. So the easiest way to avoid the policy uncertainty would be to act early and go now. It also means that you will get the best rates, because obviously we have what is called a digression model, and when we hit certain triggers, as we have done in the small-scale biomass already, then where we see deployment accelerating greater than we expected to do, then we do have a mechanism for bringing those tariffs down at regular intervals if we need to. So again, I can't make any promises beyond March 2016, but between now and then, so the next 24 months, we have an agreed budget with Treasury to promote and to deliver renewable heat, and what happens beyond that would be the decision for a future government. I would just say, though, going back to the first slide, if we don't tackle heat, we don't meet 80%. The Committee for Climate Change are talking about the need for 4.5 million heat pumps, ground source and air source heat pumps in the country by 2027 in order to meet our statutory carbon budget, fourth carbon budget. We're currently installing 15,000 heat pumps a year in the domestic sector. So to get to 4.5 million is a fairly significant mainstreaming of a niche technology, and without some form of financial incentives, then I don't see a scenario where we make the heat contribution that everybody believes is needed, and that's this government, the opposition, and
external academics. So I think that it may change, the balance may change, the focus, the amounts may change, but there will be some form of incentive on renewable heat from now to 2021 in order to meet various targets. Hope that helps.
Thank you. We have a question from Joanna. Now that she is asking, what is the payment schedule for domestic, e.g. the number of years?
So the domestic pays over 7 years. So you get quarterly payments over 7 years. Each year will be the same amount for each 4 quarters, but you'll get an uplift with inflation. But you are paid for 20 years worth of heat, so to speak. So the reason that you will see that the solar thermal tariff for the non-domestic is 10p and for the domestic is 19.2p is because we've brought that additional 13 years benefit into those 7 years of payment. So it's a shorter payment. You get slightly less money in total, but obviously that's for discounting and everything else.
Thank you. I'm sure that answers Joanna's question. We have another question from Mohammed following on from his previous question and your answer. He is wondering whether, he says, did you carry out proper consultations with non-domestic stakeholders on the scheme's design?
So for the original scheme design of the whole RHI as it was then, there was an extensive consultation in February 2010. The decision was taken at that point to remove the domestic element of it before going live in the November of 2011. So there was an extensive consultation then. We have done subsequent consultations on the changes that we're making this spring, both in terms of the tariffs last year, last summer, and the new technologies we're bringing in the previous autumn. So there has been extensive consultation on the non-domestic scheme over the last 4 years, 3.5 years.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure that does answer Mohammed's question. Okay, I don't appear to have any more questions on. Oh, hang on, sorry. Joanna's just popped another question in. She's asking, how does the RHI link to larger scale distributed heat, e.g. district heating systems?
So currently, we're not able to pay for the heat network itself. So we can't pay for the pipe work in the ground to distribute the heat. We can pay, obviously, for any renewable heat that is put into that system. So we are looking at whether we can do more. But if you do a biomass or a ground source heat pump district heating system, and obviously from that perspective, we're talking about collective building, collective properties, even if it's a block of flats. So it doesn't necessarily have to be 200, 300 buildings to make a district heating network. People often think about the old style Eastern Europe, where they had centralized heating and whole towns were on a single system. Here you could have a single building with multiple flats, and that would be eligible under our definitions. There is a separate funding stream run by the Heat Network Delivery Unit at DECC that is providing funding for feasibility and development of district heating schemes, and they have a rolling program of bids. So if you are interested in doing district heating or more on district heating, then if you give me an email address, I can email you contact details for the Heat Network Delivery Unit, and they can provide you with details of the next round of their funding, or you can look on the website, the DECC website, where all the details are also stored.
Brilliant, thank you. We have another question. I'll just give you a little breather. We have another question from Phil, and he's wondering, if a non-domestic application is made and all information is provided fully, how long does the application process take?
Well, if all the application information is provided and correct at the point of provision, then within a week, no more than that. It is manually done, so people do look through the evidence. So but it is quite a short process. The delays come when applications are sent backward and forward because of lack of detail. So some of the information that you'll see on average lengths of application are from when they first send it in to when they get everything correct. So it's quite a short process once Ofgem have all the information they need to make a decision.
Brilliant, thank you. I don't appear to have any more questions sent to me in the chat box. We do still have some time, so if anyone does have any more questions, then please feel free to send them over. Or as I said, you can unmute yourself and ask them yourself. But we'll just give everyone a few minutes just to have a think. Those are all the questions that we had at this moment in time. If anyone does have any questions at a later date, if something comes to you at the end of the day or what have you, please feel free to drop myself an email. You will have my email address. I contacted you this morning, and I can pass the email on to Patrick, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer your queries. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for registering and for taking part in today's webinar, and especially thanks to Patrick from the Department of Energy and Climate Change for taking the time to present today. So everybody is happy, and I think we'll finish the webinar now. Thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.